are there any other, I don't know, particular strategies, exercises? I mean, we're getting a little bit long on the show, but I didn't want to walk away from any of this without having spent some time talking about what we can do to change our relationships with our bodies and maybe to change our views towards society when we look at other people's bodies. What would you recommend?
Absolutely. One of the simplest things that I work with people on doing is changing just their language. If you say to yourself, I'm unlovable, I'm disgusting, or things like that, ask yourself, would you say that to somebody else? Typically, the answer is going to be no, right? I'm not going to say that to somebody. Why would I then say that to myself? So
sort of that Kristen Neff idea of it's so much easier to be kind and generous towards ourselves or towards other people than it is to ourselves. Sure.
Exactly. And so taking that approach can be really, really helpful. I'm also a really big believer of using mantras, positive self-talk, just having little statements that you can tell yourself on the regular that can give you that little pick-me-up. The other thing that I use with folks is if you have a picture of yourself when you were a child or a teenager or whenever, just when you were younger, would you talk to that child or that teenager that way?
Sure, yeah.
Right? Would you tell them that message that's going to stick with them for probably the rest of their life? Most of the time, people say no. And so I always tell people, whenever you're thinking of saying something mean to yourself, think of that child that you were, that teenager. Don't tell them that. Because you don't want them to experience the things that you've experienced. You want them to live a happy, healthy life, whatever that is. And so making sure that we don't talk to our younger self about that then helps us create a more positive experience now. And a lot of times, too, I always tell people, talk positive to yourself in the mirror. There's something about looking at yourself in the mirror, seeing yourself, hearing yourself. It really, really kind of sinks in your soul and really makes you feel much better about yourself when you can say those good things to yourself.
Yeah. I worry I've also sat in that therapy room and recommended these kinds of ideas. And I know that when people first hear them, it's so easy to dismiss it.
100%.
Right? And I liken it to when I've worked with a physical therapist. Oftentimes you'll go in and they'll tell you okay, so we need you to do this exercise where you just, lift your leg up and then put it down and lift it up and put it down. And it's so easy to be well, how is this really fixing anything? And then you go back for your follow-up appointment. They're like, you didn't do your exercises, did you? And you're like, that exercise doesn't do anything. And then you actually force yourself to go through the motions and to do the damn thing. And lo and behold, the experts actually had something there. There really is power in these things that might make you feel a little silly or might be kind of challenging to try.
Oh, 100%. Every client that I tell that to, they're always like, you want me to do what?
Yeah.
Are you serious? And I'm like, I know it sounds ridiculous. I know, but just try it. Most of the time when clients come back after they've been using it for days, weeks, months, you start to see a big difference in the way they talk to themselves, the way that they treat themselves, the way that they view the world. I mean, everything. It really does make a big difference.
Yeah, no doubt. So what should we be then doing to try and make a more body-positive world for others?
Oh my goodness. Language is always a big thing.
Sure.
But also I think taking some time to understand the education around these systems of oppression and how they keep people oppressed. A lot of the times we don't really kind of take that deeper exploration. And I think that's really important to understand because these systems are set up to support these other systems, which then keep people down.
Yeah.
So education, doing advocacy work is always very important. I think that when people can talk to legislators, when people can talk to medical providers, when people can talk to therapists and other people like that, and explain these systems and explain the things that it does to people mentally, physically, emotionally, and everything else, we then start to see that change that we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth and say that folks should listen to their doctor, but also argue with their doctor,
Right.
and listen to the experts, but also But I recognize that it's a really challenging place because there are so many people who find themselves in that exam room and being faced with a lot of these really flawed ideas. So I guess part of being prepared for that is just recognizing where the flaws are.
Absolutely. And I think something that's really important is recognizing, yes, systems are flawed. Yes, systems, have these things set in place that kind of keep oppression happen, but there's also good people in those systems who are trying to fight and educate and advocate. And looking for those people is going to be very important. So finding a doctor who is focused on health at every size, finding a doctor who is very inclusive of BIPOC individuals and other marginalized communities makes a really big difference. So there are the good people there. I just always encourage people, look at their bios, look at their reviews, find those people who are there who can help you make a difference.
Well, I mean, outside of our personal education and I suppose educating those around us, I heard you talking about, talking to legislators and things like this. For those of us who aren't going to storm Congress, what are the advocacy and activism opportunities? I mean, what should we be a part of?
Oh goodness. So I'm going to be just completely honest. I'm still learning a lot about that too.
Sure.
Politics and whatnot is not my forte. But some of the basic things that you can do is first, get out and vote. Voting makes such a big difference, especially when you have people who are doing the work of advocating, educating people when it comes to fat liberation.
Sure.
So find those people, learn about them.
A big part of that vote, I guess I just want to throw in, is voting in legislators that recognize and value expertise.
Yes.
We live in a society right now that is so suspicious of anybody with a particular education, and we are coming in as outsiders, telling educators how they should be teaching in their classrooms, telling doctors what they should be doing in their exam rooms, rather than allowing the people who are responsible for managing those ideas to take them on.
100%. Looking at people who ask questions, right? Why is it? Why are we doing it like this? Why can't it be like this? What if we tried this, right? Those people who are going to be confident and brave and courageous to ask the questions of the current systems that are in place or the current people who are in place to say, why are we doing this and what do we need to do to make it change? Makes a really big difference.
Instead of coming in from the outside and hamstringing, for instance, as a therapist, I work with trans youth, and depending on who's in the AG's office and how that's being interpreted,
exactly.
I'm being told by these outsiders what is and is not good care by people who don't understand that. So I do think that voting is definitely something to really focus on.
Absolutely. Yeah, voting makes a big difference. Again, doing the education and around the different people who are in place, in power, and, not being afraid to write, make phone calls, show up at rallies and things like that, make your voice heard.
Yeah. Well, I know that we've kind of poked around the edges of this question in a couple of different ways, but to ask it again, I know that the Hayes model has been around since at least the early 60s, but it has seemed to pick up a lot of steam over the past decade. I mean, you talked about the younger generations and the body positivity movement. Do you feel like the culture is heading in the right direction?
Yes, I do. Again, kind of like I alluded to earlier, it's a slow process, but I think we are moving in the right direction. Just like we're moving in the right direction for fat liberation, we're moving in the right direction for, things like equality, when it comes to LGBTQ plus individuals, when it comes to Black African Americans, and just everything else. Yes, this time is very stressful, and yes, there's a lot going on in our world that's fighting against that. But we have a lot of people who are fighting for that. And so being able to join those movements, being able to make your voice heard, being able to come together can make a really big difference.
Yeah.